Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be previewing LIV Golf London 2023. That's right, the LIV Series is returning to the place where it all began around this time a year ago at the Centurion Club in London, and we're going to break it down for you. We're going to talk about some golfers that we like to win this tournament outright and that we want to have in our DFS lineups if you are playing any on DraftKings this week for LIV London. Now, the leaderboard this year at LIV London is going to look a lot different than it did last year. I didn't realize until I went back and looked at the leaderboard just how different LIV Golf looks a year later this year as opposed to it does when it started at its inception last year. So it's going to be interesting to kind of break that down and talk about the different guys that are playing here this week and who we want to have in our lineups. Now, if you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like button and please hit the subscribe button as well. It shows me a lot of support. It helps the videos get noticed, and it really just helps me out more than you could ever know. I really didn't know until I started making YouTube videos and creating content just how much the subscriptions and the likes matter. So please help me out. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you like what you're hearing here on Mike's Money Picks, and you'll be notified when new episodes drop, like when we drop our fantasy football team previews later this week, and when we will be back next week. We're going to be talking the Genesis Scottish Open, as well as the alternate event. I believe next week is the Barbasol. It's either the Barbasol or the Barracuda, but we are going to preview both events. We're going to talk about the Scottish Open and the alternate event on the PGA Tour next week. So if you are subscribed, you'll be notified when both of those episodes drop. And then we're going to have a lot of content coming your way for Open Championship Week as well as continuing to cover fantasy football as well. So we've got a lot of content here on Mike's Money Picks. If you hit that subscribe button, you'll be notified when all new episodes drop. Now, before we get started talking about this tournament, I do got to say, I think LIV missed a big opportunity this past weekend with their TV coverage of LIV Valderrama. Actually, I think they ended up calling it LIV Andalusia, but either way, the LIV tournament last weekend, they missed a big opportunity with the TV coverage because with how the Rocket Mortgage Classic ended, with it being, not on television on Sunday morning, I think LIV had a great opportunity that if they were broadcasting live from Spain, then they would have gotten a big audience because there were a lot of big names at the top of that leaderboard, and it was an opportunity to watch live golf. But instead, they did the same thing that the PGA Tour ended up having, which was they had the tournament for the final round on tape delay on its normal channel later that afternoon, which was kind of a big disappointment. And I think LIV continues to miss opportunities with this TV deal with the CW. I think that the CW needs to push whatever reruns of Charmed that they have airing on Sunday mornings to make sure that these tournaments are broadcasted live so that way they can take advantage of people who want to watch live golf. Now, I can tell you I did end up watching the highlights of the extended highlights, I should say, of LIV Golf Andalusia. And so I do know how that tournament went down. It was a thrilling finish with Taylor Gooch winning over Bryson DeChambeau on the tournament's final hole. And so we're going to talk about both those guys here in our preview of LIV London. But I just want to talk about, I think that LIV, as it's currently constructed right now, they continue to miss opportunities with this TV deal that they have with the CW. And I don't know what LIV Golf is going to look like after this merger of the PGA Tour and the PIF, but I would like to see some live golf out of LIV as opposed to wherever they are in the world, having it just be on tape delay on Saturday and Sunday afternoons. I think they can definitely do better than that. But either way, LIV London is going to be taking place this Saturday, and we are going to break it down for you. So let's go ahead and get started here with the preview. All right, so LIV Golf London is going to be played at the Centurion Club, which is in the, I guess, whatever they call it in London. It's in the district of Hertfordshire. I'm sure I mispronounced that, but either way, it is going to be played at the Centurion Club. And unlike a lot of events that happen across the pond on the PGA Tour and on the DP World Tour, this is not really a links setup. If you look at what Centurion Club has to offer, it's not a super narrow, not a super difficult test of golf, but it is going to be tree lined. It is going to be a fairly straightforward parkland design. It is not going to be like links golf like you would see at St. Andrews or like you're going to see in 2 weeks at Royal Liverpool. But it is in England, and so I do think you could give a little bit of a home field advantage to the English guys or the guys who have played on the DP World Tour and have played at courses like this. Ironically, the course that the DP World Tour played at last week at the Belfry, I think is actually pretty similar to this one in terms of being a parkland design that is not a links design. You can see by the flyover that is you're going on in the YouTube video right now. The fairways are not necessarily tight. If you miss a lot of these fairways, there are trees lining most of the holes, but there are some where it's just fescue grass, so you can be a little bit wild off the tee and get away with it here. The course normally plays as a par 72, but it's going to be playing a little bit differently here for the LIV golf event. LIV is kind of trying to up the difficulty a little bit this week. And so what they did was they took the normal par 72 that is Centurion Club, and they backed it down to a par 70. They turned some of the par 5s for members into par 4s. And so what ended up happening is you end up with a lot of long par 4s here at the course this week. So what's going to end up being like necessary to succeed here at Centurion Club is to be good with your long irons and to be able to, give yourself a good drive with an opportunity to hit the green. And obviously, once you hit that green, can you knock down your birdie putt? Unlike the event on the PGA Tour this week, I do not expect this to be a birdie fest. I do not expect the winning score to be very low. And so for a little bit of information for that, we actually have a little bit of history here with this event. This is the first time we've seen this for LIV Golf, really. Last year they did play at Centurion Club for LIV London, and the winning score was -7. It was Charles Schwartzel that won it. And Schwartzel was at -7. There were a total of 8 players under par. So it did end up playing fairly difficult. But the bottom line is you can kind of look at this leaderboard, and once you get outside of the top 10, it just really goes down in quality. Like there's a lot of names like here near the middle to the bottom that you see are kind of been some of the mainstays on the LIV Tour. But there are some guys in here that are not on the LIV Tour anymore. Maybe they are playing over in Europe. Maybe they are playing somewhere else. There's not a lot of PGA Tour guys in this field. It's just not a very strong field for the first week of LIV. So last year, Charles Schwartzel did win it at -7. Runner-up was Henny Duplessis at -6. Brandon Grace, Peter Uihlein at -5. Sam Horsfield at -3. Oliver Becker and Adrian Otegi at -2. Here you get some big names. Dustin Johnson in 8th place at -1. Taylor Gooch in 9th place at even par. And then Louis Oosthuizen and Justin Harding, along with Graham McDowell, tied for 10th place. So basically, can we glean any kind of information for that? Well, so Charles Schwartzel was the winner, right? So what we know about Charles Schwartzel is he is a guy who tends to not be a good putter of the golf ball, if I'm putting it nicely. And so he's a guy that can be elite at ball striking and is a not great putter. So, does this course kind of cater to ball strikers? Maybe. I think there's a little bit with Charles Schwartzel there. Now, Henny Duplessis, the runner-up of this event, he has not played on LIV this season. So I've got his golfer profile here on rickrungood.com. He did actually play last week at the British Masters and played decent. He was T49. But if you look at his profile, Henny Duplessis is like one of the worst putters on the DP World Tour. He routinely loses a lot of strokes putting. However, he is an elite ball striker. He normally gains 5 or more strokes in the ball striking categories. And so I guess what you can kind of glean from this is knowing that Charles Schwartzel played well here, knowing that Henry Duplessis played well here, this course kind of caters to ball strikers and guys who are going to be good off the tee and good on approach. And then, maybe can they just be good enough with the putter to knock down a few putts and win the tournament, right? So in terms of comp courses, just kind of looking at what this course has to offer, there's not a whole lot of data in terms of strokes gained for the LIV guys right now. They do not break them down by categories for LIV events. So what I do have to go by in terms of trying to build a lineup this week, as opposed to just looking at recent finishes on LIV, I can look at some comp courses and how they played well there. So the 3 that I've picked, the best comp course, I believe, is the Renaissance Club, which is the current site of the Genesis Scottish Open. It's where the PGA Tour is going to be headed next week. It is another course kind of like this one that is in the British Isles, and it is not a links setup. And so it's going to feature some of the same grass types and agronomy that you would see at some of the Open Championship type courses, but it is not links golf. It's not going to be played along the ground. It's not going to be with the pot bunkers. It's going to be very much like a Parkland American Country Club type setup. And so the best LIV golfers at the Renaissance Club in their careers, you got Cameron Tringale, Dean Burmeister, Cameron Smith, Joaquin Neiman, and Brandon Grace as your top 5. Another course that I think is a pretty good comp to this one is TPC Southwind, which is the home of the WGC FedEx. Well, it's not WGC anymore, but it's the FedEx St. Jude Invitational. It's the first week of the PGA Tour FedEx Cup playoffs now. I think this is another course that requires ball striking. When you look at the guys who won their or played well there last year, you got Will Zalatoris as the winner. You had Sepp Straka as the runner-up. These are guys who are decently long off the tee, but are really good ball strikers, really good with their long irons. And so I think that Southwind is a good comparison for this one. And the best golfers at TPC Southwind on the LIV Tour for their careers have been Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Abraham Ancer, Phil Mickelson, and Lee Westwood as the top 5. And then the last one, another course that I think of as just being a ball strikers course where guys who don't necessarily putt all that well have played well here, is TPC Scottsdale. Just a course that the guys who are really good at ball striking really tend to stand out at that course because you're going to have to break out all the shots in your bag. And the top 5 among LIV golfers for their careers at TPC Scottsdale have been Louis Oosthuizen, Brooks Koepka, Brandon Grace, Bubba Watson, and Phil Mickelson. Now, granted, this includes I would say not all of their careers, but their last 40 rounds at these courses. So for Phil Mickelson, that's kind of using a little bit of his prime there, even though he's well past it now. So that might be cheating just a little bit to include Phil in there. But those would be my 3 comp courses, and those are the guys who have tended to play well at those courses. So if we're looking at the DraftKings board, how can we use that information to try to build a lineup or to try to figure out who's going to win this golf tournament? So looking at the very top of the board, I think right now there is a very, very clear top 4 on LIV. And I think these 4 have a lot more win equity than the rest of the field. I think that these 4 are the safest 4 picks on DraftKings. And if you want to get aggressive on DraftKings, I think you can actually set up a lineup with 2 of the top 4 in it without too much difficulty. And those top 4 are Cam Smith, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, and Dustin Johnson. So let's highlight each of them. So Cam Smith. A lot has been said about how he started his season with, kind of being awful on LIV at the very start of the season, and then not really playing up to his standard at the Masters. And so, that was kind of the kick in the pants for him that he needed, because ever since then, including the U.S. Open, he has not finished worse than 12th at any event internationally, whether it be on LIV or whether it be a major. He's really upped his game since the start of the season. And last week, LIV Valderrama, at a course that did not suit him well, in my opinion, he still came in a tie for 12th place. I think that's actually an encouraging sign. Valderrama was not a place where you could be wild off the tee and spray it and get away with it. Whereas I do think this course is a place that you can do that. The weakness of Cam Smith's game is his accuracy with the driver. And I think that weakness is a little bit mitigated here. And I think he would love to get into the winner's circle as he kind of is approaching the time where he's really gearing up to defend this Open Championship that he currently holds. I really think that his whole season is kind of coming down to, I want to defend this title at Royal Liverpool, and I want to make everybody go through me to get it. And so I really think that he has got his game peaking and heading in the right direction. And I do think this is a pretty good course fit for him. So I really do think that this could be a pretty good setup for Cam Smith here at the Centurion Club. Now, next up is going to be Brooks Koepka. So Brooks Koepka, not that dissimilar to Cameron Smith, started his season kind of rocky, but then he did win LIV Orlando right in the lead up to the Masters. What's very comical is he was actually 40-1 to win that event at LIV Orlando heading into it, and now you can't get him less than 15-1 at a major championship at Royal Liverpool in 2 weeks. So the story of his season has just been incredible. But anyway, he is all about playing in the majors. And this is going to be, while this is not like an apples to apples setup that is going to help you prepare for Royal Liverpool, this is his last opportunity to make sure his game is, firing on all cylinders before he heads on over to Royal Liverpool for the Open Championship, a major championship that he has not won yet. So I do think that Brooks wants to play well in this one. And I do think that Brooks is set up to play well in this one. He popped up at all of the comp courses that we talked about, and he just came in third at LIV Valderrama. He was never really a threat to win that golf tournament, but he was just lurking on the weekend. Did a good enough job in round 2 to really put himself in position to make a run for it. And I really do think that this is a tournament that Brooks Koepka could go out and win. Now, next up is Bryson DeChambeau. So last week, I actually didn't fare terribly in my DFS lineups for LIV Valderrama, and I actually mostly faded Bryson and Gooch. But, more on why that happened later. But I did not think that Valderrama was going to be a great course setup for Bryson. I said that on the podcast. I said that on, the YouTube video. I just think that it was not a great setup because it was not one where you could be wild off the tee and have success. Well, he now gets a course where he can be wild off the tee and have a little bit of success. And if you watch how he did it at Valderrama, he really just lost the tournament. I wouldn't even say he lost the tournament. I'd say Taylor Gooch went out and won it. But Bryson just had a few bad holes on Sunday where the driver got a little bit wild, got himself out of position, and couldn't recover because that's just not really what he does well. This is a course where even if you are missing with the driver, you're not going to be too far out of position. You're not going to be in too much trouble. So I think that this actually sets up a lot better for his game. At Valderrama last week, he used a lot of driving iron off the tee because some of those holes were so short. It wouldn't be too advantageous to him to use driver. This week, that's kind of like the opposite. Like, he's going to be able to freewheel driver, and he's going to have shorter iron shots into a lot of these longer holes. They're going to be intimidating for some of the shorter hitters here on the LIV Tour this week. I really do think this is a great setup for Bryson, and I think his game is trending in the right direction for sure. If I had to pick one guy to win, I think that Bryson is actually going to be my pick to win this week. I just think that the game's heading in the right direction. I think this is a much better course fit for him. I think that Smith, Koepka, and Johnson are all great top 5 or top 10 bets, but I think Bryson at the end of the day is my pick to win this week. Now, Dustin Johnson, I'm not counting him yet out either because we saw that he came in 8th here last year. That's not bad. He came in 8th at Valderrama last week, and he came in 10th at the U.S. Open earlier in June. He's another guy that his game is heading in the right direction. But the problem with DJ is that he's really just given away all of the recent tournaments on like one hole. Like, he's had like a triple or a quad, and he just kind of took himself out of contention just right there on one bad hole. If he can just eliminate that bad hole, he's going to be one of the best golfers in LIV this season, right? But he's got to go out and do it. Like, he's got to make sure he maintains that level of engagement, that level of focus, if he wants to go out and win one of these tournaments, as opposed to just letting it slip on one hole. Now, like I said about Bryson, I didn't think the Valderrama was the best place for Dustin Johnson's game. I think that this is a much better spot for Dustin Johnson's game. And when you look at what he did at the comp courses, he sets up pretty well. So I think that all 4 of these top guys set up pretty well. If you're in the top 10 or top 20 market or even top 5 market on LIV, I think that all 4 of those guys are pretty solid bets for that. I am picking Bryson DeChambeau to win this golf tournament, though. And looking at it on DraftKings, I think it's totally feasible to put 2 of them in one lineup. Like, if I were to just experiment right now and go with Koepka and DeChambeau, it gives me average remaining salary of $7,200. That's absolutely feasible with some of the values that are down further on the board. So, let's go ahead and look in this next little tier. And yes, I am putting him in this next little tier, even though he has won 3 times on LIV this season. It starts with Taylor Gooch. So yeah, the elephant in the room is the fact that he's won 3 times on LIV this season. But if you look at how he's done it, he's really made a lot of putts. Like, he's been really hot with the putter. And I think long term, I don't think his skill level is necessarily as good as Bryson or Cam Smith or Brooks Koepka. And so I'm kind of willing to just say, like, okay, Taylor, like, you had your 3 wins. I don't think you're going to be getting any more this year just from the sheer math of it. So I'm kind of willing to just fade him for the rest of the season, even though, yeah, he's going to keep playing well, most likely. But the fact that the eye test is telling me he's doing it a lot with the putter. The eye test is telling me he doesn't have the same win equity as the other guys. So I'm just kind of willing to go ahead and fade him a little bit. And if he does win, then, shame on me. But I really think that, he's kind of hit his quota this year. And I really think he's not doing it in a way that's as sustainable as where you're looking at the finishes for Smith, Koepka, and Johnson. So probably going to be fading Taylor Gooch this week. Now, Mito Pereira is another interesting one. So he's another one that I kind of think that this place fits his game a little bit well. Mito played really well in the majors last year. And if you think about major championships, those are places where you're going to have to be hitting long irons into greens. That's going to be the case at a lot of the holes this week. I kind of think that even though the yardage on the scorecard isn't going to be super intimidating this week, the the distances of those individual par fours, those are some long par fours. I think that's something that Mito really excels at. And so I would not mind going back to him for that reason. For the same reason, I'm kind of back in on Joaquin Niemann as well. Not really been super great on LIV so far this season, but he really did show some bounce back with the T10 at Valderrama. And, when you look at the strength of Joaquin Niemann's game, it is with those long approach shots. So I really do think that this could be a really good spot for him. And so I really do like Mito and Niemann in that next low tier as well. Patrick Reed is another guy that's interesting. So we saw the -7. Was it -7? Yes, -7 was the winning score here last year. Patrick Reed's a guy that we like, kind of the harder the tournament gets, right? Because he is just such good with his short game, such good at scrambling that I really do think the harder the golf course is, the better it sets up for Patrick Reed. And that bared itself out last week with his T5 at Valderrama. So I really don't mind this as a spot for Patrick Reed as well. I would say in this next little tier, I would probably fade Gooch. I would probably play Niemann ahead of Pereira and then ahead of Reed. And I'm probably not going to be on Sergio as well. Sergio, I kind of felt like Valderrama was his chance at a course that he loved and a course that he's historically played very well at. And he just came through with a T10. So I'm probably not going to be back on Sergio Garcia as well. I think his price on DraftKings is a little bit inflated because of those good finishes. And now he's at a course that's just not as great for his game. All right, so now continuing to look down the board. Sebastian Munoz is a guy that I like this week. When we talked about, Charles Schwartzel and Henny Duplessis having success here, those are two guys that are team no putt, right? Like they're guys that generally don't putt the ball very well, but are elite ball strikers. Sebastian Munoz, I would kind of put in that category. If you play Showdown Live Golf, or if you're doing like player props on Underdog, which by the way, if you are playing on Underdog, use my promo code MConley88. It is in the description of this YouTube video. It is also pinned on the pinned tweet on my Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm also, if I end up doing any props for Live on Underdog, I will be posting them on there as well. If you are doing any props on Underdog, I think Munoz is a great pick for birdies or better and for strokes as well, because he's a guy that he tends to get hot for 1 or 2 rounds in a golf tournament. And, if you're playing Showdown DFS, he's great for that. And, I think that kind of, even if it is just 2 rounds for him, or even if it is just 1 round for him, I think that gives him enough equity that he can pay off that price tag, even if he doesn't win the golf tournament. Now, Brandon Grace was a little bit of a disappointment at LIV Valderrama, but I think he's a very good DraftKings option because he seems to either come in like the top 5 or like 30th place, which obviously if he comes in 30th, he's not doing anything for you anyway. But if he comes in that top 5, he is really good for you. And he did pop up at some of the comp courses. Cameron Tringale was really good at the Scottish Open last year. He's also had back-to-back top 10s on LIV. I would not mind going back to Cameron Tringale at all. Although if you do start with that super aggressive build of Koepka and DeChambeau, you're probably going to be avoiding that range entirely. But I do like both of those guys. And then the other guy in the 8,000s that I like, Louis Oosthuizen popped up here last year. He's another guy that he's kind of like a team no putt guy where he's just elite as a ball striker and not really great on the greens. And Dean Burmeister, I would put in that category as well. I actually kind of really do like Burmeister this week, although he kind of hasn't really shown a whole lot of upside recently. He did have a T3 and a T7 earlier this season on LIV, so I wouldn't mind going back to Burmeister as well. Now, heading further down the board, there's not a whole lot here, if I'm being totally honest. My favorite play out of anybody kind of from that mid-8 to mid-7 range, my favorite play would probably be Anirban Lahiri. He's just strung together some really good finishes on LIV until the past 2 have not been great, but really at Valderrama, it was just 1 round that jumped up and got him. He had a 78 on Saturday. If he could just eliminate that 1 poor round, he obviously has the ability to come in top 10. Looking further down the board, Ian Poulter is a native Englishman. I do believe he's from near London. I think. I'm not 100% confident on that. But, give him a little bit of a home field advantage being an Englishman. And he's, got some decent finishes on LIV so far this year. Not a terrible play there. The guy that we got to talk about in this range, though, is David Puig. I've been told that is how it's pronounced. So he is a rising star. I believe at least. His last 3 events have been in T12 at LIV DC, T39 at the US Open, and T5 at LIV Valderrama. And I don't think DraftKings adjusted his price enough to compensate for that. I do expect him to be highly owned, but I think it's for very good reason. And on LIV, when you're playing, DFS on DraftKings, everybody's playing an eighth of the field anyway, so everybody should theoretically come in averaging 12% ownership. If you kind of eliminate the top 5 from the equation that never contend anyway, that makes it more like 14% ownership. So if you are playing David Pugh, as long as you mix it up somewhere, find another way to get unique, I do think that is a viable strategy. Another guy that I wanted to mention is Mark Leishman. Just thinking about what is needed at this course, he is a guy who tends to excel with his long irons, and tends to excel at kind of like major championship type setups, even though he has not been good recently. I think he would be a really good sneaky under-owned value play to go with on DraftKings. Now, looking further down the board in the 6K range, Scott Vincent and Lowry Cantor are beginning to appear like the same guy to me. Like, they're guys that are just priced down here in the 6K range on DraftKings every time on LIV, and they just seemingly give you like an above average finish every time, right? Like, neither of these guys are ever going to win a LIV event, but if they just kind of keep doing what they're doing, keep giving you that like 15th to 20th place finish, I mean, that can help you in a cash game. If you're playing, DFS cash games. In a GPP, it might not win you the GPP, but it might definitely help you cash. And if they do happen to give you like a ceiling performance, then that could really help you win a GPP. I think those are probably the 2 safest value plays here in this 6K range would be Scott Vincent and Lowry Cantor. Now, if you're looking to get really, really creative down here, I would like, in terms of betting guys to win, I would probably have stopped at like Munoz. I probably wouldn't bet anybody below Jason or Sebastian Munoz in terms of like picks to win. But if you're looking for guys for a DFS lineup, you got a few interesting options here. First of which, Phil Mickelson. Like, he's popular every LIV event in DFS. I kind of think, like the other guys I mentioned with Smith and Koepka, I kind of think he wants to have a good showing at the Open Championship. T23 at Valderrama, a course where here in London, where he's definitely comfortable playing across the pond. He's comfortable playing in, the British Isles. So I kind of think it's a not bad spot for Phil. Just know ownership is always higher on Phil than it should be in DFS. But the 2 that I want to talk about, first off, is Charles Schwartzel, the defending champ. He has been, to be quite honest, garbage in his last 4 starts. Hasn't come in better than 29th place. But he did have one earlier in the season where he was T7 at LIV Adelaide, T16 at LIV Orlando. So there is still the capability there. He's the defending champ of this event, and he's $6,300 on DraftKings. You can't really get much more affordable than that out of somebody who's a defending champ of an event. And then the last guy I want to talk about is Lee Westwood, who comes in at $6,400 on DraftKings. He hasn't really been great at all on LIV this season. His best finish has been a T16, but he did something last week that I think is worth noting. Last week at LIV Valderrama, he was T27, which was his best finish in a while, like shockingly. But what I do want to talk about is how he got there. So Lee Westwood last week at Valderrama had 13 birdies at a difficult golf course. Now, that's the same amount Bryson DeChambeau had, and Bryson DeChambeau came in second place. But the problem with Westwood was that he had 15 bogeys. So with what we know about Westwood's career, Westwood's a pretty good ball striker. Westwood has not been historically a terrible short game player either. He's not a great putter, but he's not a bad around the green player. He kind of has, a little bit of that Euro flair around the greens. So I kind of think that bogeys number, if he can just get that bogey number down, he can give you a top 15 finish, because the birdie making ability is clearly there if he made 13 birdies at Valderrama, which was a difficult golf course. And so I really do think Lee Westwood is kind of like the sneaky sleeper under the radar value play this week in DraftKings. And I definitely think I'm probably going to have a little bit of exposure to Lee Westwood at the very bottom on DraftKings. All right, so there you have it. We have talked about probably a quarter, if not more than a quarter of the field, probably like a third of the field for LIV Golf London. We've talked about, the course itself. We talked about what type of game can succeed here. We've talked about what guys I think can succeed here. And so, whether you came here for DFS advice or looking for picks for bets or player props or whatever, hopefully you got whatever information you need to hear for this video. If you liked what you saw in this video or heard on this podcast, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button if you're listening to this on audio or if you were watching this on YouTube. It shows me more support than you could ever know. It really helps the videos get noticed, helps me grow the community that we're trying to build here at Mike's Money Picks, and I really do appreciate it. So that does it for the LIV Golf preview. One last bit, just extra bit here. If you are interested in seeing who I am playing on DFS for LIV Golf London, head on over to my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. You'll get access to the DFS articles that I post every week, talking about ownership, talking about the guys that I like for that week for LIV Golf and the PGA Tour, as well as my fantasy football draft guide and fantasy football rankings. You'll have access to those as well. It is only $3 a month. It's much cheaper than buying a magazine or buying a membership to many other premium fantasy sites. And then also follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. If I end up doing any underdog pick'ems for LIV London, I will be posting them on there. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll have notice for that. And I also do the DFS rundown for LIV, where I just kind of hit some highlights of guys that I think fit into certain categories for DraftKings for that particular week. So follow me on Twitter, head on over to the Patreon if you are interested in that. Thank you guys for watching or listening to this point. I really do appreciate you guys. Hit that like and subscribe button on your way out. Hopefully I gave you whatever information you needed to make some money off of LIV Golf London this week. Thank you guys. I will see you next time.